to Beyond Gamification, but that's good news for all of you. I'm Dustin DiTommaso. I'm an experienced design director for a company called MadPow. We're an experience design agency. We have offices in Boston, Portsmouth, and Louisville, and we're also hiring. So check out our site if something like that is interesting to you. Beyond designing with a really great team of folks, I'm also part of the Gamification Research Network. This is a real thing. And I also run a habit design and behavior change meetup in Boston too. So as I said, this is Beyond Gamification, architecting engagement through game design thinking. What I want to present today is what I believe the problems are with the current discourse in gamification, how we should be thinking about how to get beyond the current state of gamification, and sort of what the real secret sauce to game design is and how to apply that effectively to products, services, and applications. Going to do that in 6 easy steps. So first, for those of you who are maybe more unfamiliar with the term, I'm going to catch you up really quickly on where we've been and where we are. All right, so since November of last year, there's been a significant surge in gamified applications and software services, mostly due to the release of Foursquare and their sort of huge jump over the last their first 15 months from 0 to 1 million users. From that, it created sort of a large media hype and a media frenzy of everyone talking about gamification being, the next best thing, the answer to all your engagement and monetization problems. Talking about the profiteering folks, the marketing folks who kept sort of pushing that out, as well as a bunch of copycat designers who sort of come up and sort of use this model of badges and points and vendors that come up and say, here's a gamification platform that you can just sort of kind of plug and play end-to-end solutions. Beyond that, there's been massive debate about gamification, what works, what doesn't work, is it right, is it ethical? So we've had a division between game designers and researchers who start to call it things like pointsification, badgeification, as well as aiming terms like exploitation, where after the marketers who are sort of using this to create sort of incentive plans and loyalty programs for software and products. So very much a discourse between designers, research, and academics versus marketers and vendors. So what we're trying to do is kind of come up with a way to sort of advance this field and create an even playing ground for all folks involved. What is gamification? Simply put, gamification is the use of game design elements in non-game contexts. Typical application of gamification goes something like this. You have an activity that you want people to do, so you give them points to do that activity. They do that activity enough, you give them digital trophies or badges, throw in a little bit of healthy competition, and just to make sure that you've got them completely hooked, how about some real-world incentives or coupons to keep things going? So for better or for worse, this kind of strategy has been applied to things like fitness, finance, commerce, fundraising, education, sales, productivity, sustainability. But if we zoom back and take a look at sort of how this all breaks down and try to see the forest through the trees, what we can see is gamification breaks down into the atoms that make up a game. Very much the mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics of the system. It's a collection of rules, patterns, and outcomes, much like a Lego house breaks down into a single individual brick. And that's an important distinction because as we look to progress the field and create a shared vocabulary around what these things are, we can see that there are distinct differences between games and play and whole and parts of a unit in a system. So if we take the term that Jay McGonigal's been using, gameful design, which is one that I like a lot, we can see that we have that, which is parts of a system. To the left of that, we have serious games, which look to make full games out of products, very much simulations, educational software, such like that. We have toys and playthings, and then we have playful or ludic design. And just to sort of nail that home, we've got, what did I put in there? Food spotting, right? Food spotting is a sort of a gameful app. To the left, we have military software, combat sims, very serious application, robotic toys, and a digital radio inspired from the playful design of Legos. So what is a game, exactly? If you think about it for like 10 seconds about how to define a game, not the easiest thing in the world to do. Again, there's been a lot of discourse over this. A lot of definitions, no clear sort of agreement. So I'm going to throw one definition into the mix. My definition, voluntary rules-bound experience of competitive strife towards discrete goals or outcomes. Does it sound okay? Anything missing? How do we feel about this? Where's the fun, right? So where's the fun? Think about this, Farm Bill, right? You manage a virtual farm by plowing land, planting, growing, harvesting virtual crops, trees, bushes, raising and tending your livestock. If you can't tend to your virtual farm in real time, you've got to reach out to your friends and have them do things for you in real time. Otherwise, you're going to lose in-game points, you're going to lose progress, you're going to lose in-game currency or real currency if you brought into the virtual system. Doesn't sound like a huge amount of fun to me, but I don't think anyone can argue about sort of the engagement factor that this has had. And that's the problem with fun. It's really, really easy to just sort of go ahead and call something fun and to think about fun as the ultimate driver. No one's going to argue that fun is an outcome of a game or a goal of a game for someone, maybe the winner, maybe not necessarily the loser. But there's something bigger at stake to kind of think about that actually drives that sustained engagement that games have. So if we can't quite wrap our brains around that concept of fun, and we can't just slap points, badges, leaderboards, and incentives to a product to keep it engaging, what can we do, right? How do we create meaning, and how do we harness that true magnetism of games to make better, more positive experiences? For that, we need to get down to the root level of what makes games and gameful design engaging and meaningful. So we need to look at motivational psychology and self-determination theory. So I'm not going to take you through this whole diagram, but really what this does is show states of motivation from amotivated, none, through phases of extrinsic motivation to self-determined or intrinsic motivation, which is what games are, volitional software, things that you do that no one is making you do. You feel sort of a sense of satisfaction internally. So we're going to focus on this. And self-determination theory is sort of the most empirically well-researched theory of intrinsic motivation. And what this does is it argues that human beings seek out and continue to engage in activities if they promise and succeed to satisfy 3 intrinsic motivational needs. Those needs are competence, autonomy, and relatedness. So the goal when designing is to try to nail as many of these as possible. And we're going to talk about a little bit on how to do that and how to fuel that action and engagement. So one at a time. Competence, and this is the intrinsic need to feel a sense of mastery or effectiveness in what we're doing, right? This is a lifelong journey. So from the moment we're born, we start to pick our head up, we start to learn to crawl, we walk, we run, we talk. We're always progressing, we're always getting better. We're trying to get better at things in our lives every day, our relationships, managing our weight, get better at our job. It's sort of this lifelong journey, this quest for mastery, right? So if feeling effective and feeling competent at things gives us energy, we seek to pursue those activities that sort of give us that boost. When we don't have that, it has negative psychological impacts. We kind of withdraw. We stay away from activities we find too difficult. So as we said, that path to mastery is a journey over time, and we're always trying to sort of push and move forward. To facilitate that journey, if you think about how to create that architecture to allow people to grow over time, right? How to create those sort of long-term and overarching goals, and within that you create a series of nested short-term goals that lead to that success of the long-term goal. So if you think about that as running a marathon, right? If you're training for a marathon, You're not going to run out and just do 26 miles right off the bat. You need to break that down into sizable chunks and nest those goals one at a time to get you to that ultimate objective. And there should always be a next objective right around the corner. You want to show people this is where you are, this is what you have next. There's always a next goal to strive for, something to progress towards. And then design appropriate challenges for all levels of folks, right? So consider the noob, consider enthusiasts, consider masters. Make sure there's appropriately scaffolded challenges to guide people through their experiences from any level within that curve. So let's look at this another way. If we look at the ultimate objective, right, what it means to win, you can nest a series of long-term goals. Maybe it's one, maybe it's several, depending on the intensity of that ultimate objective. Within there, we have nested short-term goals. And within those short-term goals is a series of actions, right? These are things that you want your players or your users to take that pushes them along that route towards victory, right? And this is a bit like setting SMART goals, if any of you are familiar with that acronym. If not, go forth and look it up on the truth machine. But the important thing about those actions is very much the feedback loop that's associated with it, right? So feedback is our method of evaluating performance. And it drives our confidence towards achieving our goals. And these patterns, these repeated successful patterns of positive feedback lead to deeper engagement and continued engagement. So we look at this and we have action. We have responses to action. So yes, I accomplished action. No, I failed. Or, we don't know. The system doesn't know. The software doesn't know. Different kind of prompt. From there, the important thing about all feedback is it consists of three things: meaningful information, recognition and outcomes. That could be awards or punishment, depending on accomplished, didn't accomplish. And then next steps, that next goal. All feedback should consist of these three things, right? Thinking about this within the systems that you design, you can actually turn this into a really great sort of group dynamic activity with your teams. It's great to get sort of subject matter experts to write meaningful information, to come up with the copy bits. Developers love to think about this kind of loop, binary logic. And then those next steps, you can all kind of get together with that to sort of build that. And there's also sort of a card game that you can play when you're designing this too, which we can talk about at the end. So beyond that, beyond engaging people and feedback loops, what are other things we need to consider when we're talking about how to design for competence? And that's the experience of challenge, right? So overcoming challenges satisfies our intrinsic need for competence. Building skills to challenges is again a very rewarding thing for people. When you think about usability or trying to design sort of in the mindset of usability, the goal is very much to lower the bar and to keep any challenge at bay. This is a different mindset of thinking. This is sort of saying give people things to develop, to explore, to improve, to sort of reach that higher needs of satisfaction. But the key here is to set the original core action very low so anyone can get in, and then appropriately scaffold the challenge as they gain mastery and as they get more and more complete within their skill sets. So you want to optimize those challenges. You want to stretch their ability, but you don't want to sort of overwhelm. So if you're familiar with Csikszentmihalyi's concept of flow, and what flow does is say that anyone within any activity, the optimal experience is in the middle of being stressed out, like too difficult, and being bored because it's too easy. You want to sort of hit people in that middle sweet spot along the way. And additionally, you want to allow people to fail gracefully if you can provide an opportunity to learn and grow from that, which again goes back to the feedback. Do you apply appropriate feedback to say this is why you didn't quite make it, this is what you can do. And again, that's also a different mindset from usability. Making progress visible. So real-time, granular, sustained, and cumulative feedback on your overall performance. So giving multiple ways to show feedback. What am I doing right now? How have I been doing? How do I compare to others? How have I done over time? Where am I? Making sure that that data is actionable and meaningful during a sort of immediate play, and again, that long-term engagement, and utilizing reward mechanics to sort of blaze that path of accomplishment. So showing what I've accomplished, giving that sort of positive feedback, giving those rewards. Moving on, and again, remember, it's not about those digital shiny trophies. It's really about the value. I've done something that I value, and I've accomplished something that's meaningful. When I have made that accomplishment, it's maybe even more important to sort of allow players to express and enjoy their dominance, right? So sustained engagement is more of a function of feeling successful continually rather than individual hurdles. By continually being able to sort of advance and move on, it drives people, it pulls people forward. So internally motivated to push forward, and by seeing that sort of trail of accomplishment, you're also pulling them as well. The other thing there too is to, when someone has made that achievement, to ease off of the difficulty for a little bit of time. So if you think about the challenge of riding a bike up a hill, right? It's sort of rewarding when you get to the top, but you really want that coast down. You really want to take that time to sort of be able to go down that hill and enjoy your mastery of achieving that mountaintop. Provide social outlets for bragging and peacocking. Yep, definitely. And then another concept to talk about here is sort of juicy feedback. Juicy feedback for a job well done. So juicy feedback is a game term that talks about sort of this overwhelming sort of blitzkrieg of feedback. It can be auditory, it could be visual. It's sort of stimulating, right? So if we think about a lot of things that we design, you ask someone, for example, to take, like a 4-hour health risk assessment. This is one of the things we design in healthcare a lot. And when they finished, you just give them one small notice that says, like, thanks, you just spent 4 hours of your life filling out this form. And here's your feedback, right? Awesome, good job, you're done. But in a game, kaboom, right? We've got immediate feedback showing us all, when to hit and where. We've got sustained feedback. We've got overall accumulated feedback. We've got clear next steps, which buttons to mash next. And there's this blitzkrieg of lights and colors and sound. The crowd cheers when you're doing well, gives you that sort of feedback. It starts to boo when you're doing bad. You know where you are at all stages of the game. So you're saying, like, oh, that's awesome, but I can't put explosions and rainbows and colored lights and lasers in my, in my software or in my enterprise product. So let's take it down, 1,000 steps. Everyone's favorite character, Clippy. So this is Office. Yes, it's way muted compared to what we saw, but for an Office application, it's pretty juicy, right? Giant congratulations, huge sort of graphic, right? We've got achievement, we've got reward, we've got next steps. I'm going to apply for that job. There's sounds, which you don't hear here. There's also a sweet balloon animation, and another check that sort of reassesses what you've done and the progress that you've made. So pretty juicy Office, right? And really quickly, another way to think about juiciness is sort of juiciness of interactions. If you've ever used this visual thesaurus compared to like a typical thesaurus, I can't say that word well. It's great. You can touch all the little balls and everything sort of moves and floats. It sort of compels you to use it and to play with it, as well as sort of the way it handles the feedback on the side. Really good, really juicy. We need more juicy. People expect juicy. So autonomy, right? Autonomy is the experience of volition or choice in one's decisions or actions, right? So in activities where we feel like we have the freedom to choose and to create the experience that we want for ourselves, the more likely we are going to sort of continue to engage and continue with those activities. So how do we use autonomy? Well, let's think about it a couple ways, right? The game belongs to the user, right? So when we build things nowadays, you have to be sort of considering that once you've launched a product, a very good deal of it becomes out of your hands at that point. You're giving it back to the community. You're giving it back to the users who are going to use your system, right? It's sort of up to them to define what they want to do and how they're going to use it, no matter how you design for it, right? But we can coach them through by giving them opportunities for choice, control, and personal preference, allowing people to use the software the way they want to use it. These kinds of things lead to deep engagement and loyalty. Again, give them that right feedback, right? Data, information, choices, for them to make the best use of their autonomy. Don't strand them. Again, good sort of usability principles. Give them the right info at the right time so that they can go about their merry way and be productive. Don't dead end them. You can design experiences on Rails, so it's another sort of game term to give the illusion of freedom. And on Rails means that you do have a dedicated pathway that you want people to do and things you want them to complete in certain steps. You want that end game to end up the same way, but you sort of you create the illusion that they have multiple choices. You kind of stack the deck behind the scenes. Let them do certain things at certain times, branch chain logic, but to the user, it feels like there's a ton to do, right? So sort of guide them through a narrow path, but sort of make it look like a huge path, right? Then consider volitional engagement, which is, I find the value in the actions that I'm taking. So think about your users and what you're designing for them. Do they find it valuable? Are you giving them things to do that they want to do, or are you very sort of business focused and focused only on the things you want them to do? Opportunities for action, right? So these can be defined as options a player perceives are available to them at any given time during the experience, right? And the goal there is to maximize those opportunities, right? And that goes hand in hand with sort of those branched pathways. So you provide a variety of ways to engage, competitive, cooperative, solo. Think about how you frame the problems and the interactions that you're designing. Are these things that can be done sort of head-to-head? Can they be done together in conjunction towards a common goal? Are these sort of one-person activities? Provide a sense of increased opportunities as people sort of advance through your system. A lot of times you design sort of a finite amount of things to do, right? So think about the onboarding with a lot of new web services. It says, come on in, fill out your profile, invite some friends, look around. The LinkedIn progress bar. At some point you're done, right? Now what? Now what can I do? I've sort of made all this great progress, now there's nothing left for me to do. So design systems that sort of allow or perceive things to do for those masters, those people that have been in your product and service for a long time, right? So give them that sort of big fish, big pond feelings, not that they've sort of eaten all the little fish and there's nothing left to engage with. Let's see, yeah. And then again, those multiple pathways leading to the desired end state. If you think about that a bit like skiing, right? The main objective is to get down the mountain, but we have different pathways for people, different skill sets, right? We've got a bunch of variety, so there's novelty and choice. We've got advanced, we've got beginner, multiple branches, all sort of coming to the same end goal, which is get to the bottom of the mountain. So it's very engaging because there's many different ways to do it. There's sort of high replay value, right? No one skis a mountain once and then goes home, unless you're short on time. So if you think of that as a visual metaphor, great way to think when you're designing your systems. Relatedness. So this is the intrinsic desire to connect with others in a way that feels authentic and supportive. So we've seen sort of the impact and cultural buzz that social media has had on the web over the last 3 years or so. And it's important to kind of satisfy those connections when possible. So if we are intrinsically motivated to seek those meaningful connections, what can we do? What can we do beyond what we already sort of know and what we're already hearing with social media, right? So things that we want to do is allow people to give and receive support within their goals, right? This is kind of an important piece, right? We want to design for these moments of relevance, right, that allow people to impact each other and the system. So it's not enough just to say, hey, here's a community, hey, there's other people on this site. We want to sort of have that meaningful connection, right? It's not enough to see other people. We want to be able to be affected by other people within a system. We want to be able to affect other people in the system, and we, at times want to be able to sort of affect the system as well. Allow that to happen. Allow people to have these sort of meaningful conversations around and about the products and services that you design. Other things is beyond the players, right? Needing to provide value to the audience beyond just the mechanics of the system. Again, this goes back to that volitional engagement as well, sort of cross ties. Making sure that you're connecting and understanding your audience and giving them the tools that they need and things that they want to be supported throughout the things that you're designing. If you tap into content that people are passionate about, such as health, wealth, these sorts of things, you've already got a leg up. There's already sort of this sort of foci of meaning that you can build around. Give people recognition for actions that matter to them, not just things that matter to the system or to the business. Allow people to have that meaningful relevance in the things that they're doing. And if you think about sort of this computer-supported cooperative work movement that's been sort of going on, there's a lot of really good stuff about connections here. If you kind of Google that, or you look into what those folks are doing and kind of the methodology that they're using to sort of create systems to allow people to work together, but also abroad. There's a really lot of good knowledge there that you can gain from here. The other key piece here too is to allow users to inject their own long and short-term goals into the system. And if you think about Mint, right? So when Mint came out, it was like, oh my God, this is amazing, right? It's this new way to look at your data. It's a really simple and clean, engaging way to sort of understand your banking that you couldn't do before. So we all jumped in and we all went into Mint and we all checked it out and plugged in all our accounts and played with the graphs, and it was great. Then that was it. That was sort of all you could do. You can kind of continue to see your score and see how you're doing, and we checked in less and less often. And so what did they do to sort of kind of bring that engagement back? Well, they thought about, what do people really want to do? Why do I want to know how my bank accounts are doing? It's because I have goals. There's things that I want to do. I want to be able to sort of send my kids to college. I want to be able to take a vacation. I want to buy this new car. This is sort of the mental model folks were having. It's the reason, we're looking at our money and we're concerned, or I don't want to, go into debt, or I want to be able to pay my bills on time. So by allowing users to sort of inject their goals and frame the way that your system works, you can sort of add that actual value of relatedness. So this has been sort of the boost for Mint. So again, that huge boost, that leveling off, introducing the goals, and all of a sudden, boom, another huge bump in engagement. So this is Gertie Robot from the film Moon, which I highly recommend if you haven't seen it yet. Last thing to think about there too is recent studies, lots of studies, that are finding that computer agents and avatars, non-player characters, have a significant sort of engaging response and motivational response on the players or the users of your systems, right? So think not just about the connections that you make, between people, but think about the language, think about the rules, think about the copy, think about the writing that goes on, with your system all the way down to your dialogues, right? Is there a tone and voice? These things can be motivating or demotivating. Very often, copy, especially all the way down to sort of micro-copy dialogues and language that's used for these kinds of things, are the last things that are thought about, or they're thrown purely at the last minute, forcing developers to sort of throw in copy to sort of get you through these interactions. Think about the tone and voice and the picture you want to paint with that, and think about how that might affect your users. And here, if It's a new site that was launched by MailChimp. I think this just came out last week or so. If you've ever looked at MailChimp and sort of how they write all their copy, it's sort of this really great, playful, sort of connected language that's really easy to understand. It really sort of chides people on. It's very conversational. They've come up with this site where you can go in and kind of learn the lessons that they've learned over the last few years and kind of get started and frame content and contexts kind of in the way that those guys do. Recommend it? All right, let's crank through. So if we take all that, theory and think about how do we put this into sort of a more step-by-step process, let's go through that. So framework for success. Basic needs or self-determination theory, which I talked a lot about. I think this is sort of the crux of it all. Also with that, we have individual differences and social influences to think about as well. Taking those things, filter them through what I'll call lenses of interest. These are your sort of traditional game mechanics, time pressures, challenges, currency targets, social influence, things like that. There's a book by Jesse Schell called The Art of Game Design. If you want to look into these lenses, it's actually, I think the subhead is like a book of lenses. These are great things. There's about 150 in there. So if you filter all these sort of motivational needs, right, and you filter that through lenses, you end up with frameworks for satisfaction, meaningful interactions, yes, fun, which then lead into engagement, moment-to-moment engagement, flow, sort of focused attention engagement, and endurability, which I may have made up, but I think I mean it to mean that it's engagement over the long term. Not sure, but that's what I mean. But first, right, step one is why gamify, right? You need to sort of address 3 critical questions before you even decide to move on. Those 3 questions really should be: what is the main reason for gamifying your product or service? How does it benefit the user? And will they enjoy it? If you can manage to kind of successfully answer those, I would say you're right to sort of move on and think about how to apply gamification to what you're designing. If not, maybe readdress it. Maybe gamification is not for you. Again, it's not sort of this panacea for delivering ultimate experience or monetization or total engagement, right? Despite what some folks are touting. So if so, think about what are the business goals? How do you get users to fulfill those goals? And what are those actions that you want players to take? From there, the crux of it here is who are your players? Who is using your system? It's really important to understand your users fully. At MadPow, again, we're sort of a research-inspired design. A huge part of what we do is understanding users, doing the research required to really know the mental models, who's using your software, what do they want, what are their needs, what are their goals. Things to think about here that I think are key is what's holding them back, right? Is it a lack of volition or a lack of faculty, right? Are there problems? So a lack of volition, do they not believe in sort of the things that you're asking them to do? Do they not see the value? Fix for that if not. Or do they lack faculty, right? Are they not able to sort of use your system, make it easier, simplify it, keep it very easy to use? Fix that too, those are barriers. What's their play style? Think about preferences there, one-on-one, competitive, cooperative, even if it's not competition-based. How do people want to interact with the tools that you develop? Who do they play with? What social actions do they find enjoyable? Why? And what metrics do they care about? What do we want to measure? What data do we want to show people? And what data do we want to collect on the back end? One other piece to players, right, which is huge, is what are their motivational drivers? And kind of a way to frame that along dyads is, are they achievement driven or are they experience driven? Do they want to have specific goals met, specific tasks met, or do they want that freedom to sort of enjoy the experience in sort of a looser manner? Speaking of that, do they need that structure and guidance or freedom to explore? How do they learn? What is their learning style? Do they want step-by-step or do they want to learn on their own? Control of others. Do they want to sort of have that competition, or do they want that social connection with other people? Where do they fit along that diet? And again, self-interest in actions, in data and things, or social interest. So am I just concerned with what I'm doing, how I'm progressing, or do I want to see, one, what the group is doing, what other people are doing, and maybe how am I doing compared to those other people? From there, design those goals and objectives, right? And again, this sort of drawing kind of nicely illustrates that path to mastery, right? We have this sort of two-person, mutually dependent journey up. We've got a quick little dip of relaxation. We've got either a break or a new challenge to master, going over a log, and then sort of this one final, arduous climb to the top. That said, think about framing goals as a hero's quest, right? We all want to be heroes at something at some point. Try to think as sort of big and aspirational as you can to create these goals and these ultimate objectives that people want to achieve, right? Why are we designing? What are we doing for folks? Make that compelling and as difficult to achieve as possible, right? It can be a mastery of new skills, habits, achievements, a new title, anything that sort of illustrates personal growth. How do you break that down into one step at a time? What must players do, right? So think about all the steps along the way in that journey. How do you break up that long-term journey into discrete steps that sort of guide people along the way? Milestones in the middle to sort of give moments of achievement, and again, those actions to sort of push them to improve. And again, when you're thinking about these things, really do kind of think big picture, right? So activities we like to do is you put things out on the table, brainstorm around this, make a huge collection of everything that you have, and then start to prioritize and weed things out. But go big first, and then start to funnel into things that will then work for the business, work for the users. But start big, narrow, small. Consider the things that people need to be able to do in order to sort of use and successfully master the system or designs that you're building for them. If you think about skills that people already have when they come in and sort of build on that, create a core sort of mechanic that's based on things folks can already do, expand from that. How do you grow that? Think about things you can grow and develop long term. Again, sort of physical skills, mental skills, you sort of get that. The other piece is these skills should be easy to start, hard to master, and easy to sort of measure on your end too, right? A lot of consideration goes into measuring. How do we do this? Does the system track it? Do people self-report? Do you need devices? Are you building sort of a behavior change activity where you're asking people to sort of run or swim? How are you going to monitor that? Do you need technology? Or do you have people sort of self-track or interact with the system as you're moving? And break those longer skills chains into those sort of step-by-step nested. Looking at those through these lenses of interest, I'm not going to cut through all these, but this is where it starts to get interesting. How can you frame problems in sort of a gameful way? How can you apply these sort of tenets of competition, time pressure, scarcity, and puzzles? How do you think out of the box? How do you make creating a sort of a time tracking application more like a puzzle? How can you throw novelty or levels into that, right? If I've entered my time by 5 o'clock every day, do I get some sort of achievement? Do social pressure, social proof? Do you show other people where they are in the system, how many hours they've worked, or if they've completed the task on time? Is that going to motivate me to sort of do my time at 5 p.m.? Is there a teamwork effort to it? If I've worked on something with someone, can they enter my time? So how do you frame the core objectives and the actions that you want to design into your system? How do you frame those using sort of different sort of gameful tenets, these sort of lenses of interest? From there, again, sort of think about those rewards and punishment structures that you're creating, right? The positive and negative results that people will incur on their sort of journey. So moving up, you may sort of go up a level, you may have points, you may have badges. Yes, there are ways to sort of use these effectively if you're going back and connecting to sort of those core intrinsic motivators that need satisfaction. You can sort of pepper in extrinsic motivators like spice if you're managing to hit the internal core. Starting a challenge over could be something negative. Again, you can think about sort of behavioral economics, that outcomes can be contingent or scheduled. The triggers for these outcomes, like when does a session end? Is it, by amount? I've done something X amount of times. Is it by time? How are these, mechanisms, these rewards scheduled? And then think about the epic win, right? So this thing could take months or years to achieve, but along the way, you need to sort of show that incremental progress. You need to sort of light that path, right? Show people these milestones of achievement along the way. So last thing here that I want to talk about is playtesting and, well, I guess in polish. So this is really important, and I want to talk a bit about the idea of experimentation and iteration too. So I think that we are beyond the practice of designing things to the nth degree before you put it out into the wild, before you launch it. I don't think that people now are expecting things to be tweaked and arranged and changed over time. Think about Facebook, think about updates. Yes, many very horrible and stressing to folks. But the more and more time that goes by, the more people are expecting software to sort of update and change over time and grow and adapt, hopefully, based on their behaviors and their needs. So get things out, get it out there. Let your audience be the test bed for you. Before that, yes, you should be doing testing here on your own, but also let the audience kind of test these things for you. Don't be afraid to release products and iterate upon them if you can do it in a cost-effective manner. So a couple things to think about when testing, right? Make sure you lower those barriers to entry. Make it as easy for people to start playing or using the software that you're designing. Make sure it's not too hard, right? So again, players thrive on that repeated success. And even if you design that with, thinking about it's just a usability thing, right? Low barriers to entry, very easy to use. That's success. I'm being able to meet my goals by using the thing that you've designed for me, right? Other things, obviously, what's working, what isn't. What have you not considered? Is it personal enough for your players? Have you connected? Do you know your players? Do you know their needs? Have you given them ways to sort of tweak and fine-tune it that best fits them? Yep, so that covers that. Are you definitely tapping into player experience, competence, and autonomy, right? Again, hitting those sort of self-determined needs. And think about what's going to keep this interesting in 8 weeks and what's going to keep this interesting in 8 months, right? So how does this scale? How does the experience scale? Have we built enough into it that it grows over time and there's enough for people of all levels to do? And if someone does hit that sort of epic win, it's kind of time to go back to the drawing board, right? If enough people have sort of mastered everything you've given them, it's time to kind of rethink, redesign, and push out version 2. So really quickly, to kind of recap everything, right? At worst, gamification is sort of that selling of incentives and turnkey sort of gamified solutions under the guise of games. At best, I think, it leverages sort of the psychology of intrinsic motivation and merges that with the practice of design, right? I would say that I think games are motivation engines, and that's where we're headed, right? That's sort of where we're starting to think about with games is what is that motivational value? What is it about them that sort of has that ability to spark interest, to keep volitional activity, and keep people engaged over time? Tons of opportunity here to sort of modify gamification. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's sort of fix it. Let's have it grow. Let's mature it as a field. Create that sort of playful design and gameful design. Really because if games are designed for entertainment, shouldn't we be able to sort of tap into that and make all the things that we build at least a little bit more sort of entertaining and pleasurable to use? And what does that look like, right? So if technology and fads are kind of always changing, our core needs don't, right? So we all have those same sort of core psychological needs. If we focus on those and we work to describe those gameful experiences in terms of genuine need satisfaction rather than simply fun, it allows us to kind of speak about how games can be meaningful, how games can be pleasurable, and how we can design these things beyond leisure and diversion, and kind of figure out how and why gamification should be applied correctly to things that we design.